cheating wife laughed as he moved out of their mansion to an abandoned apartment after their divorce, unaware of his $200 million contract. I got everything, and you got exactly what you deserve. Nothing. Those were the triumphant words Sarah Thompson declared as she watched her ex-husband load his Honda with the scraps of his former life, believing she had just won the lottery of divorces. She had no idea that the man she had just stripped of everything visible was secretly worth more than her entire family fortune combined. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about love, marriage, betrayal, greed, and Kamal. Viewers, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, only to watch them celebrate your downfall? How would you handle being stripped of everything while secretly holding the ultimate trump card? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor as Sarah threw back her head with that same triumphant laugh. The sound echoed through the Beverly Hills mansion like broken promises. I got everything, and you got exactly what you deserve. Nothing, she shouted again, savoring every word as David Thompson stood in the doorway of what used to be their bedroom. He held a cardboard box filled with old photographs and business awards that suddenly meant nothing. 7 years of marriage crumbling into this moment. Sarah's designer heels clicked against the marble as she circled him like a predator who had just made the kill. Her lawyer, a shark in an Armani suit, smirked from the leather couch. The papers were signed. The war was over. Sarah had won everything. Or so she thought. Take that pathetic car and drive somewhere I never have to see you again. She dangled his Honda keys like they were contaminated. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to be ordinary. The mansion stretched around them. $8 million of pristine white walls and imported Italian fixtures. Sarah had fought for every square inch of it. The art collection worth more than most people's houses. The Ferrari in the driveway. The Rolex collection. Even his business accounts, drained dry by legal fees and settlement demands. David said nothing. He never did anymore. 3 months of brutal divorce proceedings had beaten the fight out of him, or so it seemed. His tech company was hemorrhaging money. His patents were worthless computer nonsense, according to Sarah's expert witnesses. He was, by all accounts, a failed entrepreneur who had lived off his wife's family wealth for too long. Brad emerged from the kitchen, wrapping his arms around Sarah's waist like he owned the place. Which, in a way, he did now. Sarah's new boyfriend had been waiting in the wings for 18 months, patient as a spider in its web. Baby, is he finally leaving? Brad's voice carried that entitled drawl of old money and newer cocaine habits. Sarah pressed her face against Brad's chest, performing her role as the victimized wife. He's taking his junk and disappearing, just like his pathetic business. The cruelest part wasn't losing the mansion or the money. It was watching the woman he'd built a life with celebrate his destruction. Every late night he'd spent working, every sacrifice he'd made, every dream they'd shared. Sarah was dancing on the grave of it all. David walked to his Honda, the same car he'd driven when they first met at Stanford, back when Sarah thought his ambition was charming instead of threatening, before money had poisoned everything between them. As he loaded his belongings into the back seat, Sarah called out one final insult. Enjoy being poor, David. It suits you. The engine started with its familiar rattle. David pulled away from the gates of his former life, watching everything disappear in his rearview mirror. Sarah and Brad stood on the terrace, already planning their victory celebration. They had no idea what was coming. 2 years earlier, when their marriage still had a pulse, David had discovered something extraordinary. The basement of their Beverly Hills mansion wasn't just storage space. It was the birthplace of technology that would make stealth bombers look primitive. The basement lab hummed with the sound of quantum processors running calculations that would change warfare forever. David's fingers moved across holographic displays, adjusting encryption algorithms, while Sarah threw another charity gala upstairs. Sarah's heels clicked overhead as she entertained donors for her latest cause. Children's hospitals, or endangered butterflies. David had stopped tracking her rotating compassion. The noise didn't matter anymore. Down here, surrounded by quantum computers worth more than luxury cars, he was building something that would reshape military communications. The breakthrough had come during a sleepless Tuesday night. Sarah was upstairs, probably texting Brad, though David wouldn't discover that betrayal for another year. While she planned her deception, he achieved something that only 5 people on Earth had managed: stable quantum encryption at military scale. Traditional codes could be broken with enough computing power and time. David's system used quantum physics itself as the lock. Any attempt to intercept messages would collapse the quantum state, making surveillance impossible. Enemy hackers would be chasing ghosts. The implications were staggering. Nuclear launch codes that couldn't be intercepted. Battlefield communications that remained secure under any circumstances. Diplomatic channels that foreign intelligence agencies could never penetrate. David filed every patent under his personal name, not his struggling company's corporate structure. A legal loophole he'd learned during his startup days, when every decision could make or break everything. His failing business owned none of the quantum technology. Pentagon contractors began arriving at 3 a.m., slipping through the mansion's service entrance while Sarah slept off another evening of wine and social climbing. Military encryption specialists subjected his system to trials that would have shattered conventional security measures. David's quantum technology exceeded every benchmark they established. Communications between nuclear submarines and Pentagon headquarters. Real-time coordination of special operations in hostile territory. Presidential emergency protocols that foreign powers could never compromise. The testing intensified as Sarah's affair with Brad heated up. David knew about their hotel meetings, the elaborate lies she constructed, the credit card receipts for romantic dinners. Each betrayal motivated him to work harder, to build something she could never understand or touch. Government interest escalated beyond limited applications. They wanted comprehensive military implementation across all communication networks, the kind of contract that transforms ordinary inventors into legends. The preliminary offer arrived on Department of Defense letterhead, $50 million for restricted licensing rights. David's response was audacious, $200 million for exclusive 5-year contracts with full military implementation. While Sarah plotted his destruction upstairs, confident she was married to a failing entrepreneur, David was negotiating the most lucrative defense contract in recent history with the Pentagon's top brass. Sarah's divorce strategy was ruthless and calculated. She had spent 8 months planning every detail with Morrison, Blake Associates, the most expensive divorce firm in Los Angeles. Their reputation for destroying wealthy husbands in court proceedings was legendary. Sarah wanted David left with nothing. The evidence against David looked devastating in leather-bound folders. His tech company was burning cash faster than a house fire, showing consistent losses over 3 years. Bank statements revealed a man living beyond his means, funding expensive research projects that produced no revenue. Sarah's lead attorney, Miranda Blake, had built her reputation on finding hidden assets and exploiting legal loopholes. Her investigators had dissected David's finances with surgical precision, cataloging every expense, every investment, every failed business venture. The prenuptial agreement became their nuclear weapon. Drafted by Sarah's father's firm 7 years earlier, it contained clauses that David's inexperienced wedding lawyer had completely missed. Clauses that could strip him of everything if the marriage failed due to his professional inadequacies. David's defense team was pathetic by comparison. Johnson Partners specialized in amicable divorces and simple asset division, not complex litigation against the most vicious divorce firm in Los Angeles. They seemed overwhelmed from day one, unprepared for the sophisticated legal warfare that Miranda Blake brought to every case. The deposition phase was brutal. Sarah's lawyers painted David as a delusional inventor whose expensive hobbies had cost them hundreds of thousands. They brought expert witnesses who testified that quantum encryption research was purely theoretical, decades away from practical application. David sat silent through every session, answering questions with minimal responses. When Sarah's experts dismissed his patents as worthless experimental technology, he never corrected them. When they characterized his basement lab as an expensive man cave, he offered no defense. His own lawyers seemed confused by their client's passive strategy. They made no serious objections to asset valuations, challenged no expert testimony, presented no alternative assessments of his intellectual property. David had instructed them to settle quickly and avoid prolonged litigation that might expose sensitive information. The Asset Division hearing lasted 3 devastating days. Sarah watched from the gallery as Miranda Blake systematically dismantled David's financial position. The mansion, vehicles, art collection, and liquid assets would remain with Sarah. David would receive his Honda, personal belongings, and those meaningless patents his lawyers couldn't even explain properly. Judge Harrison seemed convinced that David's research was an expensive midlife crisis rather than legitimate technology development. The final ruling gave Sarah everything she had demanded and more. David signed the papers without reading them, his signature barely legible on documents that would make Sarah one of the wealthiest divorced women in Beverly Hills. His lawyers looked defeated, apologizing for their inability to protect more of his assets. Sarah's victory celebration was scheduled for Saturday night at the Beverly Hills Hotel. She had successfully stolen everything from her faithless husband while positioning herself as the wronged wife deserving sympathy and financial security. Monday morning arrived with broken air conditioning and thin walls that couldn't muffle his neighbors' domestic disputes. David's new studio apartment in downtown Los Angeles was everything the Beverly Hills mansion wasn't. Small, loud, and honest about what it offered. The building's elevator was broken again. David climbed 4 flights of stairs, his laptop bag bouncing against his hip. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and disappointment, a sharp contrast to the marble corridors he'd called home for 12 years. His apartment was barely 600 square feet. A Murphy bed that folded into the wall. A kitchenette with appliances from the Clinton administration. One window that faced an alley where delivery trucks rumbled past at dawn. David opened his secure email account on the same laptop where he'd designed quantum encryption systems worth more than small countries' defense budgets. The inbox showed 37 unread messages, but only one mattered. Department of Defense. Subject line: Project Quantum Shield. Contract approval. David's hands remained steady as he clicked open the message that would rewrite his entire existence. The Pentagon had made their decision after 18 months of classified testing and evaluation. Contract value: $200 million over 5 years. Implementation timeline: immediate deployment across all military communication networks. First payment: $50 million, wired within 30 days of signature. The technology that Sarah had dismissed as worthless computer experiments was about to become the backbone of American military communications. Every secure transmission from nuclear submarines to Pentagon headquarters would depend on algorithms David had developed in their basement. His response was immediate and strategic. David contacted discretion specialists who helped wealthy individuals manage sudden financial transitions without attracting attention. Shell companies were established in Delaware and Nevada. Offshore investment vehicles were structured through legitimate channels that would protect his privacy. The government contract would remain classified at the highest levels, making David's wealth completely invisible to public scrutiny. Sarah's investigators could search forever without finding traces of his Defense Department relationship. David established his temporary headquarters at the apartment's small dining table, surrounded by incorporation documents and investment agreements. His old Honda remained parked on the street below, a perfect disguise for someone about to become one of America's wealthiest defense contractors. The irony was perfect. Sarah's inheritance had funded the research that would make David extraordinarily rich without her. Every designer handbag she'd bought, every spa treatment, every expensive dinner with Brad, all of it had helped pay for equipment that created his quantum breakthrough. Within 6 months, he received additional contracts. Allied nations wanted similar systems for their own defense networks. Private military contractors were offering partnership deals worth hundreds of millions more. 18 months after her divorce victory, the market crash hit Sarah's portfolio like a sledgehammer to crystal. She sat in her mansion's marble kitchen watching her inheritance evaporate on her laptop screen. Red numbers cascaded down the display like digital blood. 3 generations of her family's wealth, built through careful real estate investments and conservative financial planning, disappeared in 6 weeks of market chaos. The luxury stocks her advisors had recommended as absolutely secure were now worth less than restaurant receipts. Brad's true nature emerged when Sarah's bank statements arrived. The trust fund socialite she'd left David for was drowning in gambling debts and cocaine expenses. His family fortune was imaginary, existing only on credit cards and borrowed money he could never repay. Sarah discovered Brad's betrayal through her own best friend. Rebecca had been sleeping with him throughout their entire relationship, meeting him at the same hotels where Sarah thought they were building their future together. The photographs on Rebecca's phone showed Brad in compromising positions that made Sarah's stomach turn. The Beverly Hills mansion became a financial anchor dragging her toward bankruptcy. Property taxes alone consumed $40,000 quarterly. The staff salaries for housekeeping, landscaping, and security ate through her remaining liquid assets like termites through wood. Maintaining the lifestyle Sarah had fought so hard to protect was costing more than she could generate from her rapidly declining investments. The art collection that had seemed so valuable during divorce proceedings found no buyers in the luxury market downturn. Sarah's social circle began distancing themselves as her financial struggles became visible. The charity boards that had once competed for her involvement suddenly discovered conflicts of interest that required her resignation. Friends who had celebrated her divorce victory stopped returning calls. Meanwhile, rumors about David's success circulated through Los Angeles defense industry networks. Pentagon contractors spoke quietly about revolutionary encryption contracts worth unprecedented amounts. Technology journalists investigated reports of breakthrough quantum systems developed by independent inventors. Sarah's attempts to gather information about David's situation yielded contradictory intelligence. He still drove that ancient Honda Civic, still lived in the same downtown apartment building, still maintained the appearance of someone struggling financially after devastating divorce proceedings. But the rumors persisted and intensified. Defense industry sources mentioned government contracts that dwarfed anything they'd seen before. Sarah's paranoia grew as she realized she might have made a catastrophic miscalculation during their divorce. Her new attorney, the fourth law firm she'd hired since burning through her divorce settlement, began investigating David's patent portfolio with more thoroughness than her original legal team had managed. The quantum encryption patents that Morrison, Blake Associates had dismissed as worthless theoretical research were generating serious interest from military technology companies. The investigation revealed David's sophisticated legal strategy. Every patent had been filed under his individual name years before their marriage deteriorated, protecting his intellectual property from community asset division. His apparent cooperation during divorce proceedings had actually been calculated protection of his most valuable creations. Sarah realized she had been completely outmaneuvered by a man she'd underestimated at every turn. The Lamborghini Aventador purred through Beverly Hills traffic like a mechanical panther. David's hands rested confidently on the steering wheel as he navigated streets where he'd once driven his beaten Honda in shame. The transformation was complete and impossible to hide any longer. His penthouse occupied the entire 40th floor of Century City's newest tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Los Angeles sprawling beneath him like a conquered territory. The apartment building where he'd hidden after the divorce was now luxury affordable housing, managed by his foundation for families struggling with financial hardship. David's quantum encryption company employed over 300 engineers across 4 locations. Government contracts had expanded beyond his wildest projections. Allied nations competed for licensing agreements. Defense contractors offered partnerships that would reshape global military communications. The private jet waited at Van Nuys Airport, a Bombardier Global 7500 customized for international negotiations with defense ministers and technology executives. David's calendar was booked months in advance with meetings that would determine the future of military encryption worldwide. Sarah's financial collapse had become public knowledge throughout Los Angeles. The mansion was foreclosed after she defaulted on property taxes. Her remaining possessions were auctioned to cover debts accumulated during desperate attempts to maintain her lifestyle. Where David was dining with Pentagon officials discussing expansion into naval communication systems. Sarah approached his table with the careful desperation of someone who had lost everything. She looked older, worn down by financial stress and social isolation. Her designer clothes were last season's offerings, probably purchased during better times. The confidence that had once made her dangerous was replaced by hollow recognition of her catastrophic mistakes. Sarah's voice trembled as she acknowledged what she'd thrown away. The quantum patents she'd dismissed during divorce proceedings were generating more annual revenue than her family's entire real estate empire had ever been worth. Her inheritance had funded David's research while she planned his destruction. David's response was measured but firm. He acknowledged their shared history without bitterness, explaining how his success came from patient innovation rather than legal manipulation. His Pentagon dinner companions observed the exchange with professional interest, recognizing the brilliant mind behind their most valuable defense contracts. The woman who had celebrated stripping David of everything now stood before a man who dined with military leaders and shaped national security policy through technological advancement. Her betrayal had elevated him to heights she could never have imagined. David never pursued traditional revenge against his former wife. His extraordinary success was victory enough, proving that intelligence and perseverance triumph over greed and betrayal. His wealth continued growing through ethical innovation that protected American interests while creating genuine value. Sarah walked away from that restaurant understanding the magnitude of her loss. The quiet man she'd underestimated had become one of the most influential technology contractors in American defense history. Her laughter during his apparent defeat had cost her the greatest fortune of her lifetime. David's patient silence had protected his most valuable creation, delivering the most satisfying comeback in modern divorce history.